Will Javier Ordóñez's death mark a turning point for Colombia? In the same way we condemn police abuse, we also condemn the violence and vandalism carried out by some protesters. Abuse and violence are not solved by more violence. So Bogotá Mayor Claudia Lopez tweeted in response to a night of deadly protests across the Colombian capital that left at least 9 people dead and saw over 50 police stations as well as a number of city buses and other buildings vandalized and burnt to cinders. The protests were a reaction to the death of Javier Ordóñez, a 44-year-old unarmed civilian who was pinned to the ground and tasered for over a minute by 2 police officers on the night of Tuesday, 8th of September. The incident was filmed by an onlooker and quickly went viral. While the exact details as to why Mr. Ordóñez was stopped by the police remain unknown, it is believed he had been drinking in a house with friends and had gone out to get some more alcohol when he was met by the officers. In the video, he can be heard pleading various times for the tasering to stop, but it continues until a couple of other police officers arrive. He's then taken away to a nearby station where he allegedly receives more abuse that eventually leads to his death. The Minister for Defence's announcing of a full internal investigation did little to quell the growing outrage in a country that tends to have little trust in its police force. The vigil organised the next day in the neighbourhood where Mr. Ordóñez was attacked was replicated across Bogotá, mostly in working-class areas, with the focal point for each being the local police station, small rapid response centres as they are. In my own neighbourhood, in the far north of the metropolis, 25 kilometres from where Mr. Ordóñez lived, the gathering started off largely peacefully, similar to what happened elsewhere. No more than 20 people blocked one lane of traffic outside the police station, which was manned by 2 officers. Banging pots in the trademark Cacerolazo non-violent protest, they chanted "murderers" and other anti-police slogans. It wasn't long before a group of youths, mostly male, joined. With their arrival came the use of physical force in the shape of launching stones and other rudimentary missiles at the well-protected police station. These stations were built to survive bomb blasts, so a few stones barely left a mark on the large reinforced windows. Nonetheless, the attack turned into a constant barrage as the number of protesters grew significantly, with attempts made to set the building alight. With similar incidents occurring elsewhere, reinforcements for the stranded pair of police officers were slow to arrive, but arrive they did, about 20 on motorbikes. They managed to push back the protesters and secure the station. What ensued was an ugly standoff, with projectiles being fired in both directions amidst the occasional gunshot, which we assume came from the police. After hours of attack and counterattack, the outnumbered police officers eventually had to abandon the small station, which was later torched. The net result of this particular standoff was 3 dead protesters to add to the other deaths elsewhere in the city. Mayor Lopez, as Colombia's most vociferous anti-corruption politician who attracts much liberal support, her subsequent call for calm and purely peaceful protest has been largely followed, bar a few small but no less destructive incidents in some sectors of Bogotá, as well as in a number of other major cities in the country. The focus is now turning to what kind of police reform, if any, will be forthcoming. It's fair to say that most Colombians agree that better training is fundamental to changing the force's attitude in a country with a fairly low level of basic education across the board. There's a widespread belief that many officers use unnecessary force far too often. According to official sources, before this week's violence, there were already over 130 reports of police abuse in Bogotá this year alone. The idea that the horrific abuse suffered by Javier Ordóñez was a rare event doesn't wash with many. Right now, however, with centre-right President Iván Duque from a party that has had as its motto "Mano Firme, Corazón Grande," firm hand, big heart, there's a concern in more liberal quarters that he and his administration focus too much on the former and very little on the latter. The family of the late Mr. Ordóñez, as well as Mayor Lopez, have spoken of their hope that his death will be the catalyst for meaningful reform of state forces. Those who have been following Colombia for years will be forgiven for being less than optimistic of that being realized.